Hi, London. I'm recording in a classroom. This is waste step, most I can get, and I have to redo it because YouTube hates me. Okay. Anyway, starting. Have you ever been aware of your constitutional rights? It's kind of a weird question, but then it kind of makes you think like, what even are they? So what makes America special is the fact that we run under a democracy, and how that works is basically allowing the voices of the people of the country to speak up on certain things that they want to be established or changed within the system. That's what makes it special. Thus, that's thanks to our First Amendment right. And in this speech, I will be basically explaining what our First Amendment right is, how we can analyze it through historical events, and how, like, why we should be aware of its use in current events. Now, here's is my main points. So, one is going to be what is our First Amendment and its significance, then how history has reflected the importance of this constitutional right, and finally, how to recognize the use of it in current events, as I said in my thesis statement. Anyways, point one, what is the First Amendment right? Well, according to the Constitution itself, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right of peoples peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And basically, it's just saying that we're allowed to practice religion freely, speech, assembly, press, and petition. And this is the First Amendment of our Constitution. So it's kind of right off the bat, like, you have the freedom to do this. And yeah, it's our First Amendment, and it was established so long ago that it kind of is like the foundation of this country, because once again, the reason why the British kind of came over was so that they could be free in what they want to celebrate or interpret. Anyways, leading on to my second point is how has history reflected the importance of the constitutional right and how we can abuse it? Well, something I would really like to cite regarding our First Amendment is here in the 1960s during the Montgomery bus boycott. So according to the First Amendment Museum, because over 70% of Montgomery bus's patrons were black, the boycott refused in drastically reducing the profitability of the busing system. The organization leading the boycott was the Montgomery Improvement Association, aka the MIA, which had just elected their new president under a charismatic preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. Under his leadership, the boycott continued with astonishing success. Montgomery City Alliance lost between 30,000 and 40,000 bus fares each day during the boycott. And basically, the significance is that, as I said before, in our First Amendment rights, one of the 5 things that it allows us to do is protest the government, and that's exactly what they did, because hate crimes among black people while they were fighting for their civil rights, in especially during like 1955 moving on into the 60s, is so important, because the government would say one thing, but like the local and state law would say another, and it completely contradicted with their rights. And as a result, because they were able to protest the government, bus fares went down, because most of the time it was African Americans that would use those bus fares. And because of that, because of them being able to protest the government, and eventually they got the law passed where they don't have to where they have to integrate buses as a result, and public transportation in general. So as you can see through history, we have already kind of established, like, we can do this, and it's definitely possible that our First Amendment right does come in handy. But how can we analyze it today? Thus leading into my third point, how can we recognize the use of the First Amendment today in current events? Now, this is a very recent event. It's from March, actually, and so the evidence is from CNN, and according to them, the Trump administration is lightening its grip on efforts to quash pro-Palestinian demonstrations on college campuses, even as a protest over the detention of activist Mahmoud Khalil flared at the president's New York City residence, and resistance efforts continue in the courts and beyond. So what's happening recently, and has been happening since late 2023, is that Palestine and Israel have been in a conflict, and the issue is that our country is supporting a genocide, because we are supporting a country that is attacking harmless civilians against conflict. And as a result, people are abusing their First Amendment right, as they should, protesting the government, telling them we shouldn't be funding these people if they're just overall creating an even bigger genocide and losing more lives by the day. However, we have to recognize that our First Amendment right, as I said before, the Trump administration is trying to quash it, as in they don't want these college campuses to be allowing protests to be happening, and that is completely against our right to protest the government. This is very specific and important because it's a constitutional right, and if you're trying to stop it in the country, then you're going directly against the Constitution, and it's unconstitutional. And I feel like we really need to use our critical thinking skills today, because our First Amendment right is actually such an important right because it gives us the freedom to do these things. But if you're trying to destroy the purpose of that, then you're truly destroying the purpose of this being an American democracy. Thus, I'm going to go over all three of my points one more time. Basically, in conclusion, first, First Amendment right basically includes our constitutional rights to religion, free speech, press, assembly, and petition. Next, the First Amendment shows that the citizens of this country can that perspective can be seen on all sides, and specifically the Montgomery bus boycott has shown that protesting the government has worked, and our First Amendment right has been abused in the past in the way that it works. And third, tension in current events today can even show how now we can speak for ourselves, especially in the case when a presidency or some group tries to shut it down. Thank you for listening to my informative speech. My name is Lynn Tase. Thank you.